Welcome back, seekers of stories and wisdom. You're watching LitGenie, where literature comes alive through insight, intrigue, and a little bit of magic. So, if you're ready to ignite that interest once again and dive deeper into a soul stirring journey of discussion and fun, let's start once again. This time, we are again back with our further discussions on the Bhagavad Gita as we have been doing for the last couple of records. We have been discussing the Bhagavad Gita from an essentially modern perspective, trying to put the text into a more informed, contextual understanding for us. We have tried to lessen the gap between this rich ancient text, its philosophy, and our modern problems and situations, where we try to understand how the relevance still continues, how the contemporaneity of our world today still holds an undeniable connection with this extremely rich and wise text. So, without any further ado, let's start our discussions for the present discussion here today. Well, the topic we'll be discussing today is last time we discussed Bhagavad Gita from the context of free will and determinism. We tried to understand how does the Gita analyze the claim of the individual versus the idea of a cosmic design or a cosmic way of things where fate or destiny seems to play a role. And the point at which we came to an end, our discussion came to an end, was there is no strict yes or no to this dilemma. There is a midway, a middle path, a path of moderation where a combination of both is what can ensure a successful and a worthwhile existence for us. Well, so taking on from there, we go to the next idea of discussion today, which is where we start discussing the binary of selflessness versus individualism, which is a very, very, burning reality of the lives we live today. This binary of vouching for selflessness as opposed to a concern around the needs and the demands of the individual, the rise of individualism. So how does the Gita look at this binary? Well, the Gita suggests essentially one thing that we have by now established is that, if not anything else, the Gita suggests balance, creating a mid path, a midway through which we go ahead discovering the realities of life. So in this case also, the Gita talks about a balance, striking a balance between our tendencies of free will and that of of the advocacy of selfless action. Remember, we had also discussed this in one of our primary initial videos, where we tried to understand how do we look at the element of nishkama karma, right? We had started discussing the Bhagavad Gita from this dilemma that Arjun essentially faces at the beginning of the Kurukshetra, where he was stuck between deciding which way to go, what to do, how to decide which is the right decision to take when it comes to acting, taking upon an action. Well, so selflessness and individualism is a very curious combination, because before we get to this point, here another auxiliary point which needs to be raised to further this understanding is the idea of the existence of a greater I within all of us, which is an Upanishadic way of understanding. The Upanishad believes that all of us, each and every individual, is a combination of a sense of I, which is very, very located and minuscule in nature, which is represented by a small I within inverted commas, and then there is also a larger consciousness where we connect with a universal singular self, which is the presence of the capital I, the consciousness of a capital I amongst all of us. And these two versions, these two ends of the praxis of our idea of I exists amongst all of us. It's only that our choices in given situations determine whether I allow the small I in me to act, or do I choose to be part of that larger being, the capital I, the selfless being, who manages to think beyond the needs of the individual and work in a way which is geared towards a universal good, towards a larger good, right? So holding on to that thought, let's come back to this discussion around the binary of selflessness and individualism as the Gita looks at it. Well, the Gita's advocacy of selfless action, or karma yoga, as we have already established in our earlier video, contrasts with the more modern Western concept of liberalism, which essentially values personal ambition. What I want to do, what I want to achieve, in which way am I gearing my hard work, in which direction is my consciousness driving me. This concept of the rise of this sense of self, which is essentially rooted in the personal ambition and self interest. While selfless service begins with altruistic ethics, of course, the expectation of acting without desire. Does it ring a bell? See, we are situating a connection with nishkama karma once again. So, the expectation of acting without desire. I do something, but I do not essentially expect anything out of it, for personal gain can conflict with contemporary values of self actualization. What is the point? Let's go back to it once again. The Gita's advocacy of selfless action, or karma yoga, or nishkama karma, whichever way you want to put it, contrasts with the modern Western concept of liberalism, which essentially values personal ambition and self interest. While selfless service begins with altruistic ethics, the expectation of acting without desire for personal gain can conflict from time to time with contemporary values of self actualization. Why am I doing it? What is it doing? Whatever I'm choosing to do now, how is it impacting the flowering of myself, my persona, my ambition? How is it impacting me in a positive way? Is it? If not, why am I wasting my time here? This is the more mainstream tendencies we have come to live with today. However, psychological research on well-being and mindfulness increasingly supports the Gita's idea that detachment from the fruit of action leads to greater inner peace. This is something that modern day psychological studies have largely talked about, that one of the primary crises of the modern civilization is excessive attachment with how we choose to work towards our personal ambitions, and then the unavoidable resulting disappointment that comes with such ambitions when they do not work out in our favor. So, what is the way out of this rising sense of depression and disappointment that has almost become an epidemic for our generation? It is to choose to do something which is not always outcome oriented. You see, where even before you start doing that, you know that whatever I'm doing right now, it's not going to benefit me directly. It is not going to produce tangible outcome, tangible quote unquote, what should I say, benefit for me directly. But still I choose to do it. Why? Because I derive some unknown pleasure out of it. Well, to establish this point, I'll go back to a very common example I've been giving for ages to my students in class when I discuss this point. Think of this situation. Let me give you this random situation to make you understand how we can establish this concept of selflessness versus individualism. Think of it. Say, this is a random day at college, or this is a random day at office, and through the day you have been toiling over your assignments, you've been banging your head against the workstation, you did not get any time for your lunch, and the only thing that you can think of by the later part of the day is, when am I going to get out of office, or I'm going to get out of my college, and I'm going to hit that favorite eatery of mine and get that yummy sandwich. I'm so hungry. And incidentally, this is also a day when you're not carrying too much of cash, and you've also, this is, say, an eatery that is not, what should I say, empowered by GPay or any sort of online transaction methods. Okay, so all you can do in order to grab that sandwich is pay your currency note, right? So you walk into this eatery, you pay out those bucks, and you grab your yummy little piece of favorite sandwich, and you get out of the eatery. You've started walking down on the footpath with that piece of sandwich in your hand, waiting to open it and start gorging upon it. Then suddenly what happens? There's a tuck at your shirt. You look around, there's a small little street urchin with a nice little sweet smile on his face, but the expression on his face says the poor little child is very hungry. And he actually holds out his hand to you and sort of, without even uttering a word, makes a statement that, would you like to share a bite with him? The poor little child. For a fraction of a second, you stand there thinking what to do. You're flabbergasted. And even before the more practical version of yourself hits you, something in you forces you to just hold out your hand and give the sandwich to the child. Remember, you're hungry through the day, you've worked very hard through the day, you're very tired, and you were waiting for that bite at the sandwich through the entire day. There are not much currency notes left in your pocket to get another one, but still, you give out that sandwich to the little child, and then you walk away from that situation with a smile on your face, with a howling stomach, still hungry. This is a very common random situation, right? Must be that you have already faced one in your life already. Now, have you ever wondered what actually forced you to do that in that situation? It was what you did in that situation was everything against the interest of the individual that you were in that situation. But what was it that forced you towards that selfless act? And yet you walked away from that situation with a smile on your face, which means something in that situation brought you a moment of happiness, some sort of an undefined, inarticulate state of happiness, satisfaction. This is what the Gita talks about when it sort of holds up the idea of selflessness. This is when we connect with the larger I, the capital I was talking about. Because in that moment, your hunger is not just your hunger. Somehow, it has emancipated and crossed over and become part of the universal hunger, of which this street urchin is also a part of. And in that moment, something within you forces you to choose not yourself, but that greater action, which still, despite not bringing an end to your physical plight, gives you some sort of deep spiritual emotional satisfaction, some sort of unknown happiness. This is karma yoga. This is nishkama karma. This is detachment from the fruit of your action. Your action was to walk into that eatery and buy that sandwich. With bucks you had worked very hard to earn. But still, you gave away that sandwich and still walked away happy from that situation, because you were, something in that situation made you suddenly become detached to the outcome of what you were doing in that moment. And then what you had received was great inner peace. So you see, when it comes to deciding upon the binary between selflessness and individualism, the Gita says it is the self within us which decides what we end up doing. And the fun, the magic of the situation is, the more we practice it, the more easily it comes to us. The more number of times you try being selfless in a situation, whatever it is. A friend is absent. Last time you were absent, she never printed out the note for you. But this time she is absent, you printed out one for her. Or say somebody had left you a negative comment, but you returned it with a positive one. Whatever it is, any random thing you can think of on everyday basis, where you are not really geared towards an action that is oriented toward individual benefit, but an action which is done with a sense of detachment, it is sure to bring you peace. And that is what the Gita is trying to help us identify. That is what truly will help us, get a hold on the rising epidemic of disappointment and disillusion that has become a perennial reality of our lives today. I'm sure this discussion will help you lead a simpler and happier life now on. Believe me, I have tried practicing it in my life on a daily basis. Little changes that I've tried to make. It's hard to do because all of us, we love ourselves the most. But still, believe me, it will ensure you a moment of peace. Try and practice that, and please let me know how you liked this discussion. In case you carry out any of the experimentations I was talking about in your everyday life yourself, let me know how that made you feel, and do converse and comment on the video, and let's just keep talking about what we are doing here, because that will, if not anything else, give you a moment of tranquil stillness, a moment to stop for a while and think, what exactly are we living through, which are the times we are living through, and how can we choose to be different, a little different, while we are forced into this hurried rat race on a daily basis, right? Well, until the next video, I hope and wish a much more peaceful and happy existence for all of you. Wish you all a little bit of stillness in your life, a little bit of sanctity in your thought process, and let's meet again in the next video. Thank you so much. Subscribe to the channel, spread the word, like and share the video, and do leave your comments. Thank you so much.